I fell in love with a woman who had a daughter, and I fell in love with her world, too. I thought if I loved enough, sacrificed enough, I'd become a real part of their family. I was wrong. I lived like a shadow, doing everything for my wife and her daughter, but never being called family. This is the story of a stepfather trying to fill a void in a child's heart and discovering the limits of love. My name is Chris, 41, an AC repair technician in Dallas, Texas. My life used to be like an old notebook. Go to work, come home, read, tinker with broken electronics to pass the time. I liked the quiet, the simplicity, the lack of complications. I never imagined stepping into a ready-made family with a little girl or falling so deeply in love. Everything changed on a scorching summer day. I was sent to fix an AC unit at an office downtown. The heat was brutal, sweat soaking through my shirt. Then Julia appeared, like a cool breeze in the stifling air. She was sharp, full of life, with a smile that lit up the room. We chatted while I worked about the weather, jobs, then small things like coffee and books. When I left, I knew I wanted to see her again, even just once. A week later, we sat across from each other at a cozy coffee shop. Julia was direct, no nonsense. I have a daughter, Ellie, 6 years old. She's my whole world. If you want to be close to me, you have to accept her, too. Her words didn't scare me off. I smiled, nodded. Loving Julia meant loving her world, and Ellie was the heart of it. 2 years of dating felt like a dream. Julia was radiant, Ellie curious and adorable, and I was determined to be more than just their mom's boyfriend. I didn't push Ellie to call me dad. I just wanted to be someone she could count on. I picked her up from school, tied her shoelaces, listened when she rambled about her favorite cartoons. I was clumsy, sometimes awkward, but I tried my best. Once, I burned a batch of pancakes, and Ellie giggled. In that moment, I thought I was getting closer. One rainy afternoon, Ellie spilled milk on the kitchen table. I grabbed a towel, smiled at her, trying to ease her embarrassment. She looked at me, hesitated, then whispered, "Thanks, Uncle Chris." My heart warmed. Not dad, but a start. I thought maybe I was being accepted. Maybe I was becoming part of this family. Julia and I got married after 2 years. A small wedding, just close friends and family. Ellie wore a white dress, holding Julia's hand as we said our vows. I looked at them, feeling like I was touching a dream. I wasn't just marrying Julia. I promised to love Ellie, to build a home where all three of us belonged. Standing there, surrounded by well-wishers, I believed love would guide us. But I soon learned that loving is easy. Becoming a real family is a bigger challenge than I ever imagined. I stepped into Julia and Ellie's world with an open heart, but I didn't know some doors don't open easily, no matter how much you love. Moving into Julia's house was like stepping into a vibrant painting. Their small home was warm, with Ellie's scribbled drawings plastered on the walls, the fridge covered in school schedules and notes, and her bright laughter echoing from the living room to the kitchen. Every corner carried their mark, and I longed to be part of that picture, not just a passerby. I started with the little things, hoping to build a bridge to Ellie. Every morning, I'd wake up early, standing in the kitchen with the smell of coffee, making powdered sugar pancakes for Ellie and brewing black coffee for Julia. I learned Ellie's favorite foods, mac and cheese, no broccoli, ever, and packed her lunch with little notes. "Have a great day, kiddo." I drove her to school, tried chatting about her friends or the latest Disney movie, even if I got just a distracted nod. Those small moments made me believe I was getting closer, but Ellie kept an invisible distance, like a thin but unbreakable wall. She wasn't cold, she was polite, always saying thank you or yes, sir in a soft voice, but her eyes never lingered on me, as if I were familiar but unimportant. When I invited her to play, she'd nod and slip back to her room, clutching her favorite doll. When I tried holding her hand at the park, amid laughter and golden sunlight, she gently pulled away, her small fingers slipping from mine like water. I stood there, hand empty, heart heavy, but I smiled so she wouldn't notice. I told myself it was normal. Ellie was only 6, still adjusting to a new man in her life. I wasn't her dad, and I didn't expect to replace him. I just wanted to be someone she could lean on, someone she could call when she needed help. So I kept trying. I bought her a stuffed elephant because she loved the zoo, hoping she'd cuddle it at night. I watched Frozen 3 times, memorizing Let It Go to talk about Elsa. Even if I got just a vague nod, I learned to braid her hair from YouTube, fumbling until she giggled at the messy result. Those rare moments, like tiny sparks in the dark, kept me hoping. One afternoon, I suggested baking cookies together, hoping for a happy memory. I set out flour, chocolate chips, and a tiny apron for her. At first, Ellie was shy, hovering by the counter, but she started laughing when flour stuck to her hands. We made star-shaped cookies, and when they were done, she took a bite, her eyes lighting up. "These are so good, Uncle Chris." My heart soared. She ran to show Julia, holding a warm cookie, and I stood in the kitchen, watching them laugh, thinking the bridge between us was nearly built, but that joy was fleeting. One evening, I sat with Ellie as she worked on math homework. The living room was cozy, golden light spilling onto her drawings on the walls. "Need help?" I asked, pointing at her notebook full of numbers. She looked at me, then called out, "Mom, can you come here?" Julia, busy in the kitchen, replied, "In a minute." "Sweetie." Ellie waited, pencil still, ignoring my offer. That moment cut like a knife. Not because she didn't want my help, but because she didn't see me as someone who could help. I smiled, pretending it didn't hurt, but inside, a storm was brewing. I took her to the zoo, hoping for more memories. The park was alive with sunlight, kids' laughter everywhere. Ellie beamed at the baby monkeys swinging around, her eyes sparkling. I reached out, "Hold my hand, kiddo, so we don't get lost." But she stepped back, her laughter fading, and ran to the next exhibit. I stood there, hand empty, in the middle of the crowd, feeling the gap between us wider than ever. Julia saw my efforts. "You're so patient," she said, hugging me in the kitchen, the smell of fresh-baked bread around us. "Ellie's lucky to have you." Her words were like a lifeline, but deep down, a quiet pain grew. Ellie's thank yous were polite, her smiles fleeting, her glances quick. I was there every day, but not really there, not in her heart. I wondered how much time, how much effort would it take to cross that invisible line. 3 years after the wedding, I was still searching for my place in this home. I was a husband, a provider, a stepfather, but I felt like nothing at all. The house was still warm, with Ellie's laughter and Julia's morning coffee, but I was a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Every day, I cooked, cleaned, drove Ellie to school, helped with homework. I was present for every moment, but it felt like no one truly saw me. Ellie wasn't cruel. She said good morning or thanks for the ride in a gentle, well-mannered voice, like she'd been taught to be polite, but those words felt programmed, empty of feeling. When I asked about her day, she gave short answers, eyes glued to her phone or out the car window. During family movie nights, the TV's glow on our faces. I sat nearby, hoping for a shared laugh, but Ellie curled up with Julia, nestled in her mom's arms as if I weren't there. I tried harder, even when it felt like swimming against the tide. I learned to cook Ellie's favorite meals, burning the mac and cheese more than once, making us all laugh. I studied her interests, from cartoon characters to the games she played on her tablet. Once, I bought a puzzle set she'd mentioned, thinking she'd be excited. She opened it, said thanks, Uncle Chris with a faint smile, and tucked it away in a corner. I stood there, staring at the forgotten gift, my heart aching. I didn't expect her to love me right away, but I hoped I could bring her a little joy. One night, I tried reading her a bedtime story. Her room smelled of bath soap, the glow of her nightlight soft and warm. I picked a tale about a princess and an elephant, hoping it'd remind her of the stuffed animal I gave her. She listened, clutching her doll, but when I asked, "Did you like it?" she just nodded and turned away. I left the room, a forced smile on my face, wondering if I was trying in vain. The hardest part wasn't Ellie, it was Julia's mother, Elizabeth. From our first meeting, her eyes sized me up, like I was an imposter trying to sneak into a place I didn't belong. She never said it outright, but her words cut like knives. "Ellie's so much like her dad," she'd say at dinner, glancing at me with a thin smile. Or, "Blood is blood." Isn't it a reminder that I'd always be an outsider? One evening, we had dinner at Elizabeth's house. The dining room was elegant, chandelier light glinting off porcelain plates. Ellie excitedly told everyone I'd fixed her broken bike, the wheels now spinning smoothly. I smiled, proud to be part of her story. I started to add something, but Elizabeth cut in, her voice calm but sharp. "Chris is handy with machines, isn't he? But raising kids? That takes a real father's heart." The table went silent. Julia froze, her fork midair. Ellie stared at her plate, saying nothing. My face burned, my throat tight. Elizabeth's words weren't just a comment, they were a verdict. I wasn't family. I was tolerated, not accepted. I wanted to stand up, to say I'd done everything for Ellie, that I loved her like my own. But I sat there, mute, my hands clenched under the table. Julia grabbed my hand, her fingers cold. I looked at her, hoping she'd speak up, defend me, tell her mother I was more than handy, but she stayed quiet, just squeezing my hand like she could soothe the pain. Her silence hurt more than Elizabeth's words. It was like confirmation that, in their eyes, I'd never truly belong. That night, I stood on the balcony, watching Julia and Ellie inside, laughing over a board game. The warm glow of the lamp framed them, a perfect family portrait. I stood outside, in the dark, like my own shadow. I called a friend, hoping for comfort. "You're doing great." "Chris," he said, "not everyone's got your patience," but his words only deepened the emptiness. I didn't want patience. I wanted to be loved, to be seen. I started avoiding family gatherings, not out of anger, but exhaustion. I was tired of subtle digs like, "She needs her real dad," or "Outsiders are just that." I wondered, how long do I keep trying? But part of me still believed that if I pushed a little more, things would change. I didn't know the worst was yet to come. 4 years after the wedding, my world began to crumble. One Saturday afternoon, I was fixing a leaky faucet in the kitchen, hands greasy, the smell of metal mixing with dripping water. Julia walked in, her face pale, her voice trembling. "Mark called. He wants to see Ellie." Mark, Ellie's biological father, the man who left when she was a baby, leaving Julia to raise her alone through the hardest years. Julia rarely mentioned him, just a few bitter references. I thought he was gone for good, a distant ghost. But now, after years of absence, he wanted back into Ellie's life, into the family I'd poured my heart into building. We sat at the dining table, the overhead light casting shadows on Julia's worried face. Her hands were clasped tightly, nails digging into her skin. "Ellie has a right to know her dad," she said, but her eyes betrayed her fear that Mark would disrupt everything, hurt Ellie, or that I wouldn't handle it. I looked at her, keeping my voice steady. "If you think it's best for Ellie, I'll support it." But inside, a growing dread felt like the ground cracking beneath me. How could I object? I wasn't Ellie's dad. I was just Chris, the guy who'd been there, day after day, trying to fill a role that wasn't mine. Mark's first visit was Ellie's 9th birthday. The house was decked out, pastel balloons floating, the sweet smell of cake in the air. He showed up in a crisp suit, carrying a massive cake, a pile of neatly wrapped gifts, and a confident smile that drew every eye. Ellie's face lit up when she saw him. She ran to him, hugging him like he'd never left, like those years of absence were a brief dream. I stood in the corner, holding a tray of cupcakes I'd spent all morning decorating, feeling the world tilt. My cupcakes suddenly felt pointless, just like my presence. Mark was everything I wasn't: charismatic, charming, with a warm voice and a smile that won people over effortlessly. But most importantly, he was Ellie's real dad. He told stories of far-off travels, California beaches, Asian night markets, making Ellie laugh with silly jokes. He promised to take her to a water park that weekend, and she hung on every word, her face glowing in a way I'd never seen with me. I stood there, watching silently, feeling like an extra in my own home. After that day, Ellie changed. She talked about Daddy Mark constantly, like he was the center of her universe. "Daddy Mark got me a remote control plane," she'd tell Julia, eyes sparkling. "Daddy Mark says he'll teach me to surf when I'm older." Every mention of his name cut deeper. I was still the one driving her to school, sitting with her for homework, reading bedtime stories. I was the one wiping her nose when she was sick, fixing her bike when it squeaked. But in Ellie's eyes, I was fading, replaced by a man who showed up with gifts and sweet promises. One afternoon, I was helping Ellie with a solar system model for a science project. The living room was bathed in sunlight, planet pieces scattered on the table. She struggled to attach one, and I smiled, reaching out. "Let me help, kiddo." But before I could, Mark walked in, shirt pressed, voice cheerful. "Let Daddy Mark take care of it." Ellie handed him the piece without a glance at me. I pulled my hand back, my heart sinking, watching them laugh together. Her laughter rang out, clear as a bell, but it wasn't for me. I stood up, slipped outside to the yard, and stared at the red evening sky, wondering if I had any place left in this house. That night, I sat alone in the living room, streetlight filtering through the window. I looked at an old photo of me, Julia, and Ellie at the zoo, taken on a bright summer day. We looked happy, like a family, but now I saw the truth: I'd never truly belonged in their story. I was a placeholder, filling a gap until the real star returned. I gripped the frame, fighting tears, but my heart was already breaking. I realized that no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't compete with Mark, not because he was better, but because he was Ellie's blood, a bond I'd never have. The months after Mark's return were a slow unraveling. Like everything I'd built over 4 years was erased in moments. Ellie revolved around him, as if I'd never existed. She'd race to the door when he arrived. Voice bright, "Daddy Mark's here." His name echoed through the house, each syllable a knife to my heart. I was still the one carrying her backpack every morning, picking up scattered toys, fixing broken things around the house. But to Ellie, I was a shadow, a backdrop to Mark's dazzling moments. I tried to stay strong, even as each day grew heavier. I told myself Ellie was just a kid, caught up in the excitement of a dad she'd never known. I reminded myself I didn't need the title dad, I just wanted a small place in her life. But every Daddy Mark squeezed my heart tighter. I'd spent 4 years loving and caring for her, driving her through streets lined with golden fall leaves, helping with homework at the kitchen table, holding her when thunder scared her. But none of it seemed to matter to her anymore. One evening, Ellie was playing with Mark's remote control plane in the backyard, the sunset blazing red. The toy got stuck in a high branch, and she panicked. Eyes welling up, I ran out, climbed the tree, and carefully retrieved it, despite branches scratching my hands. "Here you go, kiddo," I said, smiling, handing it to her. But instead of thanks, she turned to Julia, voice sharp. "I wanted Daddy Mark to fix it. Uncle Chris isn't my dad." Her words hit like a punch to the chest. I froze, unable to speak, blood dripping from my hand onto the grass. She ran inside, leaving me with the toy. My heart shattered. Julia approached, her eyes apologetic, but she just took my hand silently. That moment was the final blow. I wasn't angry at Ellie, she was just a kid, saying what she felt, but her words confirmed my deepest fear: I'd never be her dad, no matter how hard I tried. I stood in the yard, the sunset fading, feeling the world collapse around me. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. After Ellie was asleep, I sat with Julia in the living room. The dim light felt heavy, the air thick with unspoken pain. The room, once filled with our laughter, now held only silence. "I feel like I'm disappearing in this house," I said, my voice shaking. "I love Ellie, but she doesn't accept me. Today, she said I'm not her dad. I don't know what else I can do." Julia looked down, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Chris," she said, voice breaking. "I know you've tried, but Ellie, she's young, and Mark's her real dad. I can't force her. Even though I know it hurts you." She paused, took a deep breath, and continued. "I feel helpless. I want to keep you, but I have to protect Ellie. I don't know how to make you both happy. Every time I see you hurt, I want to hold you and say it'll be okay, but I'm not sure anymore." Her words were both a verdict and a confession. I saw the conflict in her eyes, and for the first time, I realized Julia was hurting too, torn between her love for me and her duty as a mom. But that truth didn't ease my pain. "I've done everything," I said, my voice raw. "I drove her to school, read to her, fixed her toys. I tried to be the dad she needed. But it's not enough." "Is it because I'm not her blood?" Julia cried, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want you to think that," she said. But she didn't deny it. The silence that followed was the clearest answer. I'd never be enough, never cross the invisible barrier of blood. That night, I sat in the garage, surrounded by the familiar smell of motor oil. I held the stuffed elephant I'd bought for Ellie, its fur worn from time. I remembered the early days, making pancakes in the kitchen, Julia hugging me, saying I was wonderful. I'd thought love could build a family, but now I saw the truth. I was trying to fill a space that wasn't mine. I was fighting a battle I'd lost from the start. The next day, I stood by the window, watching Ellie and Mark fly a kite in the yard. Their laughter rang out, clear and bright, while I saw only my faint reflection in the glass. I wasn't angry at Ellie, she was just a kid. I wasn't angry at Mark, he was doing what I couldn't, but I hurt. Hurt from hoping too much, loving too much, and being left with emptiness. I knew I had to make a choice, even if it tore me apart. I couldn't keep living as a shadow, unseen, unacknowledged. I realized I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. Not for Ellie, not for Julia, and definitely not for myself. I was exhausted from living like a ghost, worn out by hoping for a place that didn't exist. I'd given everything, my time, my heart, my dreams of a family, but the wall of blood stood firm, impossible to climb. One night, with Ellie asleep in her room full of drawings and toys, I sat with Julia in the living room. The soft yellow light highlighted her tired eyes. The air was heavy, like we both knew what was coming. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady, but the words trembled. We should separate. Julia, maybe, divorce. Julia's eyes widened, then filled with tears. She didn't argue, didn't beg me to stay. She just nodded, her voice a whisper I understand. Her quiet acceptance hurt more than any fight could. It was like confirmation that we were both exhausted, crushed by a family that couldn't come together. We'd loved each other deeply, dreamed of a shared home, but now that dream was shattered, leaving fragments we couldn't piece back together. The weeks that followed, we lived like ghosts in the house, passing each other in the hallway. I folded Ellie's scribbled drawings, carefully placing them in an old box. I packed away the stuffed elephant, the puzzle set, the little bike I'd fixed for her. I took down the family photos from the walls, moments at the zoo, evenings laughing at the dinner table, memories I'd thought proved our happiness. Each item was a cut, a reminder of what I'd tried to be and what I now had to let go. One evening, while cleaning the garage, I found an old doll of Ellie's, forgotten in a corner among junk. I picked it up, its plastic eyebrows faded. I remembered when she clutched it tightly as I read her a bedtime story, her eyes bright as she listened to The Princess and the Elephant. That time, she'd said, "You tell good stories." It was one of the rare moments I felt close to her. I sat there, holding the doll, wondering, does Ellie ever think of me? Does she know how hard I tried to love her? Or am I just a passerby, a fleeting memory in her life? The day I left, the sky was gray, a light drizzle on the windshield. I loaded my things into the truck, each box carrying a piece of my heart. I looked back at the house one last time, at the familiar wooden door, the porch where I'd waited for Ellie after school. Julia stood there, arms crossed, eyes red. She walked over, hugged me, and whispered, "Thank you for everything." I nodded, unable to speak, afraid I'd break if I tried. Ellie was at school, unaware I was leaving. I wanted to hug her one last time, to tell her I'd always wish her happiness, but I knew it was pointless. She'd made it clear I wasn't her dad. I drove away from the neighborhood, the house fading in the rearview mirror. My new apartment was small, plain, with cold white walls, like my life before Julia. I sat on the couch, looking at a photo of Ellie on my phone, her bright smile at the zoo, pointing at a giraffe. I didn't cry, didn't rage. I just felt empty, like part of me stayed behind in that house, in the years I hoped, loved, and failed. Later, I heard Julia and Ellie moved in with Elizabeth. Mark was around more, not just weekends but picking Ellie up from school, taking her on short trips. Once, I stumbled across a photo online, Ellie and Mark grinning on a beach, sand in her hair. They looked happy, like a real family. I thought about Ellie, wondering if she ever remembered me. The mornings I made pancakes or fixed her bike. Probably not, but I didn't resent her. I just hoped she was happy. Even if I wasn't part of her life anymore, life after the divorce was quiet, but not empty. I slipped back into old routines, work, tinkering with electronics in my small apartment, walking in the park on cool afternoons. But I wasn't the same Chris, the guy content with simplicity. I carried the pain of those years, the love I'd given, the dreams that broke. I also carried scars, but with them, a new resolve to find myself again, to live for my own life. I threw myself into work, taking on bigger, tougher projects. The clang of metal in the repair shop, the smell of oil and sweat, became a kind of therapy. Clients praised me, coworkers respected me, and I started feeling valuable not as a stepfather, but as Chris, a man standing on his own. I bought an old bike at a flea market, spent a week fixing it, painting it bright red. I rode through the city, past streets lined with golden leaves, feeling a freedom I'd forgotten. A coworker, noticing I was quieter, invited me to a support group for stepparents. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't used to bearing my soul, didn't want to relive those painful years. But one evening, I stepped into a small meeting room, warm with lamplight and the smell of coffee. The men and women there, with stories like mine, made me feel less alone. An older man shared how he left his family because his stepkids rejected him. A young woman, hair tied high, cried as she said she'd never feel good enough as a stepmom. Their stories were mirrors, reflecting my pain but also giving me hope. I opened up, telling them about Ellie. I talked about making pancakes, the stuffed elephant. The moment she said I wasn't her dad, my voice shook as I described leaving. The house fading in the mirror. They listened, nodded, and an older man put a hand on my shoulder. "You did your best. Loving is enough, even if it's not returned." His words were a spark, helping me see I hadn't failed. I was learning to love in a different way. I started writing, not for anyone to read, but to heal. I wrote about mornings in the kitchen with Julia, Ellie's laughter over cookies, the nights I stood on the balcony feeling lost. Writing helped me see that, even if I didn't get the family I dreamed of, I'd lived true to my heart. Those pages, filled with ink and emotion, were a journey back to myself. I found joy in small things. I joined an art class, fumbling with brushes but laughing as my strokes took shape. I befriended my elderly neighbor, listening to his tales of world travels. Once, I hosted a sharing night for the support group, inviting everyone to tell their stories. A young member, eyes red, thanked me. Because of you, I don't feel alone. I think I'll keep trying. That moment, I knew I was doing something meaningful, not just for me, but for others lost like I was. I'm not fully healed. Some nights, I dream of Ellie, the old house, what could have been. Some days, I look at her letter and wonder if I could have done something different, but I'm moving forward, step by step, and I believe I'll be okay. I'm no longer the invisible stepfather. I'm Chris, a man learning to love himself and live for the days ahead. Looking back, my story is a lesson in love, limits, and letting go. I once thought love could conquer all distance, prejudice, blood ties. I loved Ellie like my own. Spent 4 years building a family, but I couldn't replace her real dad, and I've learned that's okay. Not every door opens, no matter how hard you knock, but what matters is that you knocked, you tried, you loved with all you had. Love isn't about owning or forcing someone to open their heart. It's about giving what you have, even if it's not returned. It's knowing when to stay and when to walk away. I left because I loved Julia and Ellie too much to trap them in a story I didn't belong in. In letting go, I found a new love for myself, for the life I'm rebuilding from the pieces. If you're hearing this and have ever felt out of place, loved without being loved back, I want you to know you're not alone. Maybe you're a step-parent, a lover, a friend, or just someone trying to find your place in a world that doesn't seem to see you. I've been there, standing on that balcony, looking at my family and feeling like a stranger. I thought I failed because I wasn't acknowledged, but now I know you don't fail when you love. You only fail when you stop valuing yourself. Your efforts matter, even if no one sees. Your heart is worthy, even if it's been broken. You deserve love not just from others, but from yourself. I learned that through the hardest days, nights in a cold apartment, afternoons biking alone, pages stained with tears, and I want you to find that, to find the light in yourself, no matter how small. I'm still healing, still learning to live with my broken pieces. Some days, I look at Ellie's letter and smile, grateful she showed me I left a mark. Some days, I wonder what I did wrong. If I could have stayed longer, tried harder, but I know I wasn't wrong to love, to sacrifice. I'm just learning to accept that not every story ends as we dream. Sometimes, the end isn't failure, it's a new beginning, a chance to rewrite your own story. I want to hear from you. Have you loved someone who didn't love you back? Have you had to let go to find peace? If you were me, would you have stayed or left? Have you ever felt invisible, despite giving everything? Share your story in the comments. Your story isn't just yours. It could be a light for someone lost, like I'm trying to share with you. Let's build a community where we listen, empathize, and heal together. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it's someone struggling with feeling out of place or needing a reminder that letting go isn't failure, but an act of love. And if you're listening, Ellie, I hope you're happy. I'll always root for you, from afar. Let's keep writing our stories, with all the love, courage, and faith that, even when doors close, new paths are waiting. Thank you for joining me on this journey.